I'm married now, and my life was going great until I cheated on my husband and broke my family. You're probably wondering why I'm telling you all this, and you don't understand, so I'll start from the beginning. My name is Angela, and I am a 30-year-old woman married to my husband Steve, a 32-year-old man. We've been married for 3 years now. We don't have any kids yet, but we were planning on having some soon. I want to tell you my story. I'm not a writer, so pardon me if there's any mistakes, but I'll make sure you'll understand what I'm telling you. This is my story, and I hope that by sharing it here, I'll not only find some respite, but also some people might learn 1 or 2 things from it and not make the same mistake I did. But first, let me explain so you understand. I'll start from the beginning of my married life. I met my husband when I was 21 years old in college, 9 years later, and I still remember that day like it was yesterday. I stepped into the busy college library. The air always smelled like old books, and everyone was engrossed in their studies. I was on a mission to find a philosophy book for an assignment, navigating through the tight bookshelves. As I reached for the philosophy book I needed, I accidentally touched another person's hand. Surprised, I looked up to see a guy with warm brown eyes. "Sorry," he said, smiling awkwardly, both of us letting go of the book at the same time. "No problem," I replied, nervously laughing. It was Steve, a fellow freshman. Our eyes met, and there was this weird connection. We started chatting about our classes, favorite books, and of course, the confusing world of philosophy. The library, usually a quiet place for solo study, turned into the backdrop for something more. Our talks expanded beyond textbooks, and soon we were exploring life's complexities together. What was once a silent place filled with the rustling of pages now echoed with our laughter and shared thoughts. Our chance encounters became deliberate meetings. We'd intentionally choose the same spot in the library, our corner of shared musings. We soon found ourselves inseparable, discussing dreams, fears, and everything in between amid the library's book-filled aisles. On our first date, Steve nervously suggested grabbing coffee, and I thought, why not? We picked a cozy local cafe for our first date. We sat across from each other. The place smelled like fresh coffee, and people chatted around us. Steve always had a friendly smile on his face. He started sharing stories about his family and growing up, trying to make me feel comfortable. We chatted about everything from our favorite movies to embarrassing moments. It was easygoing, and I could feel that our connection wasn't just about deep talks in the library, but instead it ran deep. After coffee, Steve suggested we take a walk in the nearby park. Under the streetlights, we strolled and talked about our dreams. We found a bench, and that's when Steve admitted he played the guitar. I had noticed that he brought a guitar with him, and so I suspected even before he told me that he played. Curious, I encouraged him to show off his skills. He pulled out his guitar, and suddenly the park turned into our own little concert. After that, our relationship only grew more over the years, and a few years later Steve and I decided we were ready to tie the knot. Our journey together had been filled with laughs, shared moments, and lots of love. We both felt that saying "I do" was the next natural step for us. After introducing each other to our families, it was clear that they were totally on board with our decision. They didn't just approve. They were excited to welcome us officially into each other's families. When it came to planning our wedding, we wanted something simple but meaningful. We found a cozy venue with an outdoor vibe for our small guest list of close friends and family. As we dove into the wedding prep, we worked together on everything from choosing the food to creating a playlist that reflected our journey. We added personal touches like a photo display of our college days and songs that meant something to us. The excitement built up as we thought about our vows, promises that really meant something to us. Invitations went out, and as the big day got closer, we were a mix of nervous and super excited. On our wedding day, we were surrounded by our favorite people. We exchanged our vows under twinkling lights and greenery. There were tears, laughter, and so much love. Our parents, who had seen us go from college sweethearts to this big day, were there cheering us on. To be honest, I hadn't even wanted to invite my parents, but Steve had made me, as he said it was an important day in our lives, and no matter what, they would always be my parents. Either way, The celebration continued with dancing, toasts, and moments we'll remember forever. Looking around at our friends and family, it hit us that this day wasn't just about us. It was about everyone who had supported and shaped our love. After that, things only got better for us. My husband Steve and I lived in this 3-bedroom apartment which he bought, and I was really proud of him. After graduating from college, Steve eventually went through all the hurdles of medical school and then graduated and became a doctor. Though, I can't say where for the sake of privacy. I, on the other hand, became a part-time teacher. My days off on the weekdays were Tuesdays and Thursdays while I worked every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. From someone who came from a very poor home, I would say this was a huge achievement for both of us, and I loved it. We were earning well and making very good money. The only issue we had were kids. Steve wanted kids and I did too, but Steve felt like we weren't ready yet because he felt I had some issues I needed to work through. Growing up in an abusive and difficult home with my siblings had undoubtedly left its mark. But I believed I was fine and that therapy wouldn't really help. I had this skepticism about therapy, thinking it might be a bit of a scam, a money-making scheme exploiting people's problems. It's a common skepticism, but sometimes it's based on misunderstandings about what therapy really does. Life was tough for me growing up, and I knew it had left me with some issues that I never really dealt with. Steve, being caring and perceptive, noticed how my past could mess with our plans for the future. He wasn't being critical, he just wanted us to be rock solid before bringing kids into the mix. I was stubborn about getting professional help, thinking I could handle my problems on my own. Therapy felt like admitting defeat or saying I couldn't deal with my own baggage. Deep down, I kept telling myself I was fine and that therapy wouldn't do anything for me. But maybe that was just my way of avoiding the tough stuff. However, I really wanted kids. I had sworn to myself that I would never let my kids be treated the way I was treated, and that I would give them all the love, affection, and kindness in the world that was never given to me or my siblings by my parents. In fact, I was desperate to have kids. I loved kids, but Steve would not relent until I had gone to therapy, so I decided to go just to get him off my back. Steve was so excited when I told him I finally wanted to go. In fact, he was there with me when I booked an appointment with the therapist, and the therapist was even recommended by Steve. I was to see the therapist on my next day off, which was a Thursday. On that day, I got dressed and left the house. Like I've said earlier, Steve was a doctor, and he had to be on call and available regardless of if he was at work or not. That meant he was always busy, though he tried his best to make time for us. As I stepped outside to get to my car, my attention shifted unexpectedly to our new neighbor. A young guy probably in his early 20s caught my eye. He had this friendly, approachable vibe, and a genuine smile lit up his face. It was a refreshing sight. What really surprised me was his welcoming wave, and to my surprise, a playful wink accompanied it. I couldn't help but smile back, waving in return. It was a small yet sweet moment. A brief interruption from the thoughts swirling in my head. Leaving for therapy with that friendly exchange fresh in my mind, I couldn't help but feel a bit lighter. My neighbor was very handsome, and I couldn't help but wonder if he was single or not, or what if I was married to him and not Steve. Stupid, I know, but back there in my head it was just harmless fantasizing. Or so I thought. Honestly, I walked into therapy with a mix of hope and nerves, thinking it might help me untangle the mess of my past, but the whole thing turned out to be a letdown. The therapist seemed more interested in assuming things about me than actually listening. Every time I tried to share something, they'd interrupt or jump to conclusions like they had my whole life story figured out before I even said a word. It felt like they had a script in their head and were just going through the motions. As the frustration built up, I couldn't take it anymore. My hope for a helpful therapy session turned into anger, and I let out a few curse words expressing just how fed up I was. Storming out of that office, I felt a mix of anger and disappointment. Leaving therapy, I started to wonder if it was even worth it. This experience made me question whether seeking help was the right move. It was a tough moment realizing that not every therapist is a good fit. I knew I needed someone who would really listen, someone who respected my perspective, and that therapist was not it. I decided to talk to Steve about my therapy experience. I had already made up my mind that I couldn't continue with it. However, when I got home and shared my feelings, Steve's reaction caught me off guard. He refused to believe my frustration, twisting my words and making it seem like I was overreacting. According to him, storming out was unnecessary, and he suggested I should control my temper and give the therapist another chance. Frustrated and angry, I chose to keep quiet, knowing that arguing with Steve wouldn't lead anywhere positive. It felt like he wanted me to explode just so he could say he was right and reinforce his claim that I had anger issues. Internally fuming, I restrained myself from saying more. Despite my reservations, I reluctantly agreed to another therapy session to appease Steve. Unfortunately, the second round turned out to be even worse. The therapist continued assuming things and insisted I had anger issues, making me feel even more horrible. Unable to contain my frustration, I cursed at them and stormed out once again. Feeling disheartened, I came to the realization that maybe therapy wasn't the right path for me. The experience had left me feeling misunderstood and invalidated. I decided to take matters into my own hands, determined to deal with my issues on my terms and at my pace, even if it meant going through the process alone. After the disastrous therapy session, I was seriously ticked off. As I stomped my way home, still no sign of Steve, my anger was pretty obvious. I slammed my car door and straight up ignored our new neighbor's friendly hello as I made a beeline for my front door. The therapy mess was still hanging over me, making everything feel extra bitter. Just as I was about to reach my front door, our persistent new neighbor, picking up on my anger, hollered at me. He surprised me by being kind of nice and a little flirty, suggesting that talking about what was bugging me might help. I tried to blow him off, but he wasn't having it. He kept at it, trying to chat me up and even pulled off some funny magic tricks that actually made me crack a smile. Feeling a bit weirded out but also weirdly comforted, I figured there was no harm in ditching my plans to sulk alone at home, especially since Steve was still MIA and not yet back from work. Giving in, I headed back to Derek's place, my new neighbor. As we kept talking, I found out more about him. Turns out his name was Derek, and he lived solo. Derek's persistence and friendly vibe helped shift my focus, at least for a bit, from the mess of frustration and anger that had been hanging over me. Back at Derek's place, I couldn't help but notice that his house was bigger and way better furnished than ours. My curiosity got the best of me, and I asked him straight up how he could afford all this. Turns out, he was a trust fund kid. That made sense, as I had also previously noticed he had a cool car. Derek continued being a great host, keeping the vibe light and making me laugh. We discovered we had similar tastes in movies and books, sparking a few friendly arguments along the way. Derek even dared to boldly claim that the Hunger Games movies were better than Harry Potter. I strongly disagreed and stood my ground. Chillin' at Derek's place turned out to be way better than I thought. We were just vibing, chatting, and his easygoing style started growing on me. The more we talked, the more I noticed these little things about him that just made me smile. So Derek suggests we watch a movie, and I'm like, sure, why not? As we kicked back for the movie, I started feeling something more. It hit me that the laughter, our shared interests, and Derek's genuine niceness were making me see him in a different light. I was low-key, catching feelings for Derek, and it caught me off guard. I was a married woman in my early 30s, and here I was flirting with someone I barely knew, who was way younger than me. I barely knew him, and still yet here I was, feeling attracted and flirting with him. Maybe it was the temporary resentment and anger I was feeling at both Steve and the therapist, but I desperately wanted to punish and get back at Steve. It barely took time. A few minutes into the movie, and Derek and I were on each other. We both knew from the moment he invited me in, and I obliged that we were going somewhere and crossing boundaries we weren't supposed to cross. Derek and I got intimate, and I cheated on Steve. By the time we were done, a few hours had passed, but Steve still wasn't back. I was horrified at what I had done, and soon after I quickly left Derek's house and went back home. And honestly, in a few days I went through all the stages that a cheater went through. I first contemplated telling Steve, but quickly crossed that out as I knew he would never forgive me. I also lied to him about going to therapy, even though I had stormed out. I felt so guilty. I judged myself multiple times in my mind, and I even ignored Derek, no matter how many times he tried to reach out to me. However, I was soon after it. I decided I would continue my affair with Derek. I would make sure Steve never found out by using therapy as an excuse. Instead of going to that horrible, judgmental, and assumptuous therapist, I decided I would just lie to Steve after I was going and spend my time at Derek's. My plan was foolproof, or so I thought. I soon approached Derek and told him what I wanted. I wanted us to continue the affair. I told him I felt lonely as Steve barely had any time for me and basically downplayed Steve in his eyes. He agreed, of course, and soon we were having a secret affair. When Steve would think I was off to therapy on my off days, I would actually be at Derek's. I would wait for Steve to leave and head to work at the hospital before I would go to Derek's and spend the day with him. I started feeling and acting happier. Derek had a way of uplifting one's mood, no matter how sad and angry you were. Steve noticed these changes in my mood, and he happily thought that it was therapy that was making me this happy. Steve would tease me about the day I said I would never go to therapy again after angrily coming home. He would ask me to compare the sad me on that day to the happy me of nowadays. He would comment on how happy he was that therapy had made me happier, and that I should be grateful to him for pushing me to continue on to therapy. I would just smirk in my mind and agree with him. That continued on for a long time. Steve would think I was at therapy, but I would be at Derek's. On the faithful day my secret was finally exposed, everything went on as usual. I waited for Steve to leave the house and head to the hospital. I kissed him goodbye and watched his car leave the driveway. Then I dressed and headed out to Derek's. Then I proceeded to spend the day with him. We had fun like usual. We were intimate, then we had breakfast and even lunch together and watched a bunch of movies. Steve had mentioned to me that he ordered something online and expected it to be delivered that day. So I decided to go to the house and check if the item had been delivered, as I hadn't really been watching out for it. However, before I even got to the house, I noticed that Steve was on our front porch, standing and staring at me. I knew he had seen me coming out of Derek's house. Deciding to play it cool, I walked up to him and tried to pretend and lie that Derek had recently bought an IKEA furniture that needed assembling and that I had gone to help him with the assembling. However, it was pretty clear Steve didn't believe me. He just shook his head and walked inside the house. I continued trying to defend myself, but it was no use. I had been caught. Steve laid it into me. He was so angry he couldn't even keep his words straight. He was stuttering. He asked me why I hadn't been going to therapy. I was shocked. I asked him how he had known, and he told me a few days earlier he had called the therapist to thank him for my improvement. And the therapist had been surprised and told him that I never went to another session after the two where I stormed out. Steve said he had wanted to confront me, but he had wondered where I always went if I didn't go to therapy. So he waited a few days to watch me, and now my secret was open. Steve was so heartbroken. He wondered what I had seen in the new neighbor. I tried to beg him, but he refused to listen. He told me he was never getting over this betrayal and that we were done. He told me he wanted me out of his house before he came back and that he would make sure to inform everyone about what I had done. No amount of begging made him change his mind. I begged and cried and even knelt, but Steve was adamant. He wanted me out and he wanted a divorce. He then left, presumably to work. I was heartbroken. I had ruined my marriage with my own hands. I cried for hours on end before realizing that I had no choice but to pack my stuff and leave, and also hoped that Steve eventually forgave me and let me back into the house. I didn't want a divorce. I loved my husband, but there was nothing I could do, as I was greatly at fault. I went over to Derek's and told him what happened. He said he had wondered where I went because I had told him I would only take a few minutes to check if the package had arrived. Derek also said that he had noticed Steve's car in the driveway and assumed I was waiting for him to leave first before coming back over. I honestly thought maybe Derek would take me in since Steve had kicked me out. but he vehemently refused. I was shocked. I thought he liked me, but Derek revealed I was just a means to an end and that he never liked me. He even laughed in my face and said he couldn't stay with a dishonest woman before kicking me out. I was stunned. My heart had been broken twice in one day, and worst of all, I had broken and destroyed my marriage all for someone who saw me as a means to an end. Soon enough, my phone started buzzing, and everyone was calling. Steve's parents called, and when they saw I wouldn't pick, they sent me insulting texts about how I should be ashamed of myself. Even my parents called, but I refused to pick. I was already in low contact with them, so I was even surprised Steve had called them and told them what happened when he knew I didn't like talking to them. The only people's call I picked were my brothers. I was in tears as I explained to them what happened, and even though they were angry at first and even scolded me, they also gave me a 30-minute lecture about how what I had done was so wrong. But at the end of the day, I would always be family. They couldn't abandon me in my time of need, and so they came over immediately and helped me pack my stuff and took me to stay with one of them. I'm currently in my brother's house, and all I can say to you guys is I regret everything. Steve is still not in communication with me, and the only thing he has told me is that he will bring over divorce papers for me to sign. I have lost everything. I feel so angry at that therapist. I am in the process of lawyering up, and I've decided to ask my lawyer if I can sue the therapist for violating patient confidentiality by revealing to my husband that I wasn't coming to therapy, though my brothers think the therapist wasn't at fault. Well, that's the story of how I ruined my marriage for some fun. Thank you guys for listening, and I hope you don't make the same mistakes I did. I made a terrible mistake and got pregnant with a coworker. Now my husband wants revenge. Hey fellow Redditors. I am Amber, 32, married to Michael, 29, and I wanted to share how my carelessness ruined my perfect marriage with the guy who respected me the most. This post is mostly about self-awareness, so if there is anyone who wants to trash talk me about being a bad wife, or how I could have done something like this, then please, this is not for you. I am here to reflect on my mistakes and hopefully provide some insight for others who may be struggling in their own relationships. I had always been an ambitious person since I was a kid. It had always been my dream to work for TVG, which was the biggest and oldest name in the industry. I worked hard on my grades to make sure my GPA was impeccable and aced the placement interviews to make sure that I landed my dream job. All the hard work paid off when I got into TVG, my dream company. I made a promise to myself that I will become a manager within the next 2 years. I knew that achieving this goal would require dedication, perseverance, and continuous learning. With each passing day at TVG, I immersed myself in the work, seeking opportunities to take on new responsibilities and showcase my skills. As I progressed in my career, I remained focused on my goal of becoming a manager in 2 years, constantly seeking feedback and mentorship to further develop my leadership abilities. I met Michael through my family. He had recently moved to our neighborhood and went to the same church. My parents couldn't stop talking about him since the one time he helped them with their car. I wasn't very interested in meeting him, but just to get my parents off my back, I decided to meet him once and get it done with. He was handsome and charming, he made me laugh, and it did not feel forced to spend time with him. We didn't date much due to 1, my hectic schedule, and 2, he believed that dating a lot ruins the excitement in a relationship. So we got married just 4 months after knowing each other. I know this might be shocking for many people, but frankly, marriage was not a part of my plan and not my priority. I made myself very clear to Michael about my goals and ambitions in life. He was very happy and proud of me for everything I had achieved so far and everything I would be achieving in the future. I felt that it was not too bad to be married after all. We both agreed that our marriage would not hinder our individual growth and personal development. We made a conscious effort to support each other's dreams and aspirations, ensuring that we continued to pursue our goals while being happily married. This mutual understanding and respect for each other's ambitions made our decision to get married feel even more right. Michael was into construction, which required him to have flexible work hours, and also travel to different locations. This was perfect for me, as I did not have to worry about being a dutiful wife and make time for Michael. My marriage gave me the freedom I wanted, so I guess it wasn't that bad. It felt more like having a flatmate, as Michael would come and go depending on his schedule. I was aiming for a promotion, so I was making sure I did everything to get it. Richard was one of my teammates who would help and motivate me when things went south. I was happy to have at least one person rooting for me. He understood my difficulties and frustrations. I could talk to him about what and how I felt, and he would get it. The equation I had with Richard was very different from that of Michael. I had to prepare a presentation for my final interview, so I asked Richard if he could help me with it. We obviously couldn't do it in the office, so I asked him to come home if he had no problem. We went home and were working on the presentation, which took longer than we expected. His wife called him to ask when he would be home, and I spoke to her and apologized for keeping her husband away for so long. I promised her that he would be home soon. We ordered pizza, and we were just reviewing the presentation one last time to make sure everything was right when he dropped the pizza on his pants. Out of habit, I took a napkin and started wiping without realizing it. He held my hand and kissed me before I could react. He pulled me closer and started kissing me. With Michael away for too long, I was missing affection, so I started kissing him back. I think the rubbing aroused him, and that is what made him act this way. We made out for 10 minutes and then looked at each other. He told me that he had to go, or else his wife would kill him. I let him go but kept going back to those 10 minutes again and again in my head. The next day I went to work, but things were awkward between me and Richard. We tried so hard to act normal, but it wasn't easy. We both met at the emergency exit to discuss what to do. But we ended up making out again. After that day, every time we would be alone, we would end up talking less and doing more. It was like an addiction. We couldn't help ourselves being pulled towards each other. We both were married and knew that it was wrong, but as much as we tried to stay away from each other, it was getting more and more difficult as we had to keep working and spending time with each other. We soon gave up the idea of trying to maintain distance and go with the flow. Nobody was being forced into doing anything that we did not agree upon. We both knew that when it would come to choose between marriage and affair, we would always choose our respective spouses instead of this affair. We were never vocal about it, but it was understood that we valued our marriage more than the affair. I had finally been promoted to a team manager. I was very happy and thrilled about it because I had worked very hard and deserved this position. I made sure that my best coworker Richard would be a part of the team I would be handling. I couldn't let anyone else have Richard, if you know what I mean. Being a team lead was a different ball game altogether. It was stressful, tiring, with never-ending complaints about something or the other, and pushing people to complete their work before their deadlines. It made me lose my temper more than I would have liked to. Thank God I had Richard to help me cope with all the stress and chaos I was going through. Not many people were happy with my promotion and secretly prayed for me to fail at handling a team. I was determined to prove all of them wrong and throw it in their face by showing them what I was capable of. Michael was working on a new project for which he had to travel and stay in Detroit for the construction of a new hotel. It was a huge project which would open many avenues for him. He was a little hesitant, but I told him that he should take it up without thinking too much about it. Yes, I was genuinely happy for Michael, but I also knew that Michael being away was an opportunity for me to spend more time with Richard. As soon as Michael left, I called Richard and asked him to meet me at home to discuss a few things about the project we were working on. Of course, we couldn't let his wife doubt that something fishy was going on. His wife did not like me much, as I made him work a lot. Little did she know what kind of work we did. I never cared if she liked me or not, as I was only interested in her husband. I was working on a new project and also sleeping with Richard. I lost track of time, and after 2 months, I realized that I haven't got my period in a while. I quickly bought a pregnancy kit and tested. It turned out to be positive. I could not believe my eyes. How could I have been so careless? My mind raced with thoughts of how this could impact my life and the lives of those around me. I knew I had to make some difficult decisions and face the consequences of my actions. It was time to have a serious conversation with Richard and figure out what our next steps would be. I asked Richard to meet me at our usual cafe to discuss something important. I did not want to disclose this news over the call. I met him and broke the news to him. He immediately denied and told me that the baby couldn't be his. It could be Michael's. And how could I be so sure that it was his? I laughed at his refusal and told him that Michael had been away for more than a month, and I missed my period for 2 months. There was a 100% chance that the baby was his and not Michael's. He said that it would not be possible as we were very careful. He asked me if I missed having my contraceptives, which I did more than a few times. He said that me not having the pills was not his fault. He took every precaution necessary to not get me pregnant, so I couldn't blame him for it. He said that he had a wife, and if she got to know about it, then he would be ruined. I couldn't believe the way he was pushing the blame on me when he was equally responsible for the mess we were in. I told him not to worry, as I myself did not want any more problems, so I would anyway abort the baby. I went home and booked myself an appointment for the next week with a gynecologist. I was so tired with all the running around and the mental stress that I fell asleep. I woke up the next day and saw Michael beside me. I smiled at him and went back to sleep. I got up late as it was a Saturday. I just wanted to rest at home and do nothing. I saw that Michael was already up and preparing lunch for us. I went to the washroom to freshen up and noticed that the bin was not emptied last night. I was throwing away the tissues when I noticed the pregnancy kit in the bin showing 2 red lines very clearly. I knew that I had to hide it before Michael saw it. I wasn't sure if he already noticed it, but thought of taking my chances. He might not have seen it, otherwise he would have woken me up and asked me about it. I got ready and went to the kitchen where Michael was almost done cooking. He smiled at me, which made me relax a little. He might not have noticed or realized what it was. We both sat and started eating. Michael was definitely a better cook than me. Michael asked me if there was something that I wanted to share, so I started telling him about my new project and how stressful it has been so far. He just smiled and reacted to everything I was saying. After lunch, we went to our room, and Michael told me that he had something interesting to show me. He asked me to close my eyes and wait. By this time, I was damn sure that he thought there was nothing wrong with our marriage. I went ahead and closed my eyes in anticipation of a surprise gift. He asked me to extend my hand with my eyes closed and put something in it. I knew it was high time he gifted me something. I opened my eyes and saw the used pregnancy kit in my palm. I looked at him in shock, and he folded his hands and asked me if I liked his surprise, which was more of a shock for him. Michael had found the pregnancy kit in the dustbin and acted so innocent for the past 1 hour. He was already aware that he had been away for a project for more than a month, so there was no way the baby was his. He confronted me about it, and initially, I was very adamant that it was his. He would come home over weekends, so that explains it. He said that he was very sure that we would never have sex for at least 3 months. There was always something or the other going on. He kept asking me to come clean about it. I argued with him that he was a very untrustworthy husband. Why could he not believe me and be happy that we were going to be parents? Michael reminded me that he had had a vasectomy due to some complications, so there was no way he could make me or anyone pregnant. This was a very crucial piece of information that slipped out of my mind at the wrong moment. Of course, he couldn't have kids, and that was one of the main reasons I married him. I knew that he would never pester me to have kids, so I could completely focus on my career. He immediately knew that I was sleeping around with someone else during the time he wasn't in the city. After a series of back and forth, I couldn't lie anymore and slipped that it was Richard's. All hell broke loose after that. Michael's face turned red with anger as he demanded an explanation for my betrayal. I couldn't deny the truth any longer and tearfully admitted that Richard was the father of the baby. Michael asked me to explain to him in detail how it all started, and why I hid it from him. He told me that he would have easily divorced me if he knew that I wasn't happy with him. But the truth was that I was having no issues in being married to Michael. I was in fact very happy with Michael, as I could do anything that I wanted, and it did not even feel like I was married. I never thought about it before, but Michael did give me the freedom and space to do things my way. I wasn't even sure why I was having an affair with Richard. Maybe it was just my body wanting a new touch. I told Michael that I was sorry, and I wasn't even sure why I decided to have an affair when I had no issues with him. Maybe I liked Richard as a co-worker, which led to me having an affair with him. Imagining what it would be like to get intimate with him. My confession made Michael even more angry, that I had no valid reason to have an affair. I could see Michael feeling helpless about the situation. He asked me to stop talking and that he had heard enough. He just left me in the room, took his bag, and left. I didn't even try to stop him, as I myself was confused about the reason for my affair. I knew that it would be best to take some time away from each other, so that we could both process what was going on and then come to a conclusion. The next day at work, I received a big bouquet with a big card on it, congratulating me on being pregnant. It was anonymous, but I knew that there was only one person who could do that. After about 30 minutes, a big cake was delivered with a note that read, "Congratulations on being a father to Richard." The expression on both mine and Richard's face was enough, and it wasn't difficult for people to add 2 and 2 together. The news spread so rapidly that Richard and I were having a baby after our affair. I was called in by my boss and asked about it. He told me that he would have to report me to the work ethics committee to make sure that the rumors were false. I was very confident that Richard would have my back, so I told him that all of these were false rumors, and someone was trying very hard to defame me. A few days later, Richard was called in by the ethics committee. He was there for almost 4 hours. We were instructed not to contact each other till the case was closed. I waited patiently for any news with regards to my case with the committee. Richard smiled at me when he saw me as an assurance that he had done his part. So I was relieved that at least I would not be losing my job, which was the most important thing in the world to me. I could breathe easily now that all the allegations against me would be cleared very soon. I worked as usual until 2 days later. I was asked to go on a leave of absence till a conclusion could be reached in my case. I wondered what it was all about. But it was protocol, so I decided to comply with it. I did not even think once about any issues that I would have, as Richard would not desert me in the middle of a crisis. Guess I was wrong about it. Richard very cleverly blamed me for workplace sexual abuse. He said that I took advantage of my position and blackmailed him to provide me with sexual favors. I was on the verge of losing my job and getting blacklisted from the entire industry if I couldn't gather proof. Then my professional life would be over. I was so tense about it when I got to know that Michael had done an unexplainable thing. I was packing my bags as Michael wanted me to leave the house, and I myself was feeling too ashamed to live in the same house as him. I was almost done with taking most of the stuff that belonged to me when I saw my phone completely soaked in water. Michael had accidentally dropped my phone in the water. I asked Michael what he had done to my phone, but he kept saying that it was a mistake and he did not realize it till it was too late. I did not buy it, but there was nothing else I could say or do now. I knew that I couldn't retrieve any of the messages exchanged between me and Richard. We just exchanged messages, and there were never any pictures, so I had no proof that it was all consensual. I was almost in tears thinking about all the hard work I had put in to get till here to become a manager. It would all be gone just like that. The investigation was completed, and I was found guilty of harassing and asking for sexual favors. I appealed to the human resources team, but they denied it, stating that they had a strong testimony that I harassed and overworked people. I told them that there might have been a misunderstanding, and if I could talk to the person, maybe the outcome would be different. They weren't on board with it, but as I had been a very good employee, they gave me an exception. I was asked to come in after 2 days and put my case again with the witness that they would be bringing in. I came all prepared with how it started, and Richard was the one who kissed me first. I went in with confidence, and the witness called in was some random woman who did not even work here. It gave me high hopes to counter her and drop the sexual assault charges against me. She was introduced as Richard's wife. I felt the earth crumble beneath my feet. How could I counter the wife of the man I was sleeping with? Nevertheless, it was not the time to give up now. She played a few recordings where I confirmed that Richard was with me in my house and helping me with work. I could not deny them, as all of it was true. I did talk to her a few times, and she was unhappy about him working even after normal office hours. She had the proof, and I didn't. I defended myself by telling them that Richard was the one who started the affair. His wife defended him by telling that he would come home upset and always complained that I had forced myself on him. Again, it was my word against the husband and wife who were trying very hard to make sure I take the fall for the entire affair. As a result, I lost my job and was blacklisted from the industry. Update: I was depleting my finances at a very fast pace. Very soon I would be left with no savings. I knew that this was coming, so I had been staying in a motel for the past 1 month to save money. The divorce case took up a huge chunk of my savings, which left me no option but to be on a budget. I knew that going to court would be useless, as Michael could easily prove that I had an affair and get away with owning everything that we owned together. I wanted to mutually agree for a divorce, but Michael insisted on going to court. I knew that there would be no lawyer who would take up my case, as everything was against me, plus I had no money to afford a decent lawyer. I knew that Michael wanted me to suffer, and that was the only reason he wanted to take this divorce to the court, even though I begged and pleaded with him to settle for a divorce by mutual agreement outside of court. I promised him that I would be demanding no alimony and he was free to claim anything he wanted from me. But he denied and said he needed a fair trial to find closure. I'm not sure how true it was, but things were definitely not going the way I wished. I aborted a baby as I wasn't sure how I would be able to bring it up without a job or a man in my life. It was not an easy decision. Thanks to Michael, who sent my pregnancy test results to my family with a big balloon which read, "Congratulations on becoming grandparents," to embarrass me in front of my family. My parents were staunch Catholics and took adultery as no less than a crime. They stopped picking up my calls and cut me off. After I became a manager, I had very few friends at work that immediately cut ties with me. I basically had no one I could talk to or no one to support me in these difficult times. I'm feeling lonely and have no one I can confide in. My parents have practically disowned me and are even willing to take Michael's side. They have announced that I am a person without faith. They do not want anything to do with me because I have brought shame to their name and reputation. They are the same parents who were very proud of me, as I was the first woman in our family to become a manager in a big corporation. Like they say, when your time is bad, even your shadow leaves your side. And this is exactly what I have been feeling for a couple of days. There is no one who would want to listen to me or sympathize with me. Everywhere I go, I see people looking at me, making up stories about me being an unfaithful wife and taking advantage of my naive husband. Sometimes I feel like getting on top of a building and screaming that I'm not a bad person. I just didn't expect things to go this way. The next court hearing was something I was not looking forward to. I was shocked to see Richard being so eager to testify against me in court and mention that I forced him to be intimate with me if he wanted to get ahead in his career. I wondered if this was the same man who kept motivating me and appearing to work harder to get a promotion. I was shocked at his shamelessness at making himself look like a victim and not missing any chance of making me look like a monster. Needless to say, I lost the case. Now I am stuck in a shitty motel with no job, no parents, no husband, and basically no one to talk to. I have decided to be a lone warrior and fight my battles alone going forward. I am not writing this post to garner sympathy for myself. This is just something that makes me calm and relaxed. I agree that I committed a sin, so I would appreciate it if no one judges me for what I have done. This is my coping mechanism of putting my thoughts out there, which has helped me get through tough times. Sharing my thoughts and experiences has been therapeutic for me, allowing me to process my emotions and find solace in expressing myself. It's important to have an outlet during challenging periods, and this has been mine. I hope that by sharing my story, others may find comfort or relate to their own struggles. Thank you all for joining me in this tough journey of finding myself. I hope all of you learn from me and do not repeat the mistakes that I made. Picture me as a young girl with long hair but an average face growing up in a poor, abusive family. My family was the absolute worst. They never did anything to take care of me and my siblings. There were times we would go for days without eating. This obviously caused a lot of issues in my life growing up, and even now. I was insecure and depressed. I was also bullied as a kid, so I was more of a loner than others. I didn't have many friends, not until my brothers came along. Their names are Jamie and Drew. They were my best and closest friends, and they still are. They would practically follow me everywhere and defend me from anybody that tried to hurt me. Growing up, I honestly thought it was something that I or my brothers did that made our parents dislike us and never take good care of us. But now I realize that some people are just horrible parents. Each person develops a maternal or paternal instinct and love for their child, but that instinct skipped my parents. It's not as if I'm trying to justify what I did. No, I know what I did was wrong, and no excuse will justify my disgusting actions. I regret what I did, and I hope that I might find some semblance of peace or something by posting on here.